Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Chapter 14. So in this chapter, you're going to learn more about the sensory and motor functions of the brain and how they work. So we're going to look at what a sensation is, what happens with integration, and then motor activity, motor output. Okay? So this is just a basic withdrawal reflex. This is a somatic reflex. The figure was named too hot to touch. So what happens here, and this is just kind of an example of what is going on continuously in our brain, is receptors in the skin detect a change, in this case in temperature. So when you touch something that's really hot, immediately a signal is going to be sent to the CNS, to the integration center, and you're going to determine, or the CNS is going to then determine what response needs to occur. The information is then going to move out through the efferent neurons to some effector. The effector in this case would be skeletal muscle, and it's going to contract, moving our body away, our skin away from that environment that's too hot to touch. This is actually a reflex. A reflex in a nutshell is an involuntary, unconscious activity. So even though it's through skeletal muscle, we do not have control over this. This is going to happen anytime you touch something hot. You're going to move your hand away. That's the reflex. That's a reflexive activity. So let's look at what a sensation actually is. A sensation is something that activates sensory receptors. A receptor cell is what takes in information then. Perception then is the awareness of the sensation. So you can't perceive something without having the sensation. So a sensation is necessary for perception. For us to be able to understand and be aware of something, you have to have that sensation. And so these are different types of receptors. And these are actually different types of receptors based on their structures, which we can classify receptors by the structure type. And this is a specialized sensory receptor, whereas these are not as specialized. All receptors have to be transducers. A transducer is something that can change energy from one form to another. The energy is always going to be changed, in this case, from some form, be it an example, light energy or mechano energy, to electrical energy. That's the energy that our brain recognizes as electrical impulses. Receptors can be very simple. So like the receptors in our skin are simple neurons. Or they can be very, very complex, like our eye. A receptive field is the area that has those sensory receptors, those sensitive receptor cells. The area, so depending on the number of sensory receptors we have within an area, the field can be very large or very small. If you have a lot of sensory receptors in an area, you have a very small field for reception or for sensory information taking in. Think about, and we'll actually do an activity hopefully in class where you'll be able to detect the different types of receptive fields you have on your hand, on your arm, and on your shoulder to see the difference, what happens, which areas are more sensitive, which areas are less sensitive. And I always like to bring up, because I know that this happens, have you ever had like an itch on your arm and you go to itch it and it doesn't go away and you're like, what is going on? Because there are certain areas of your body where you might have few sensory receptors. And so when you get a sensation, and you perceive that sensation, you might be scratching in one area, but the actual issue is in another area within that same receptive field. Receptors can be tonic or phasic. A tonic receptor is going to continuously send signals about what's going on. So this is something that's going to be like your balance receptor, so that you don't lose balance. Or pain receptors, they're tonic. They continuously send signals to let you know, hey, there's something wrong with me. Phasic receptors detect a change, they send the signal, and then they decrease in sensitivity. So they phase out. Phasic phases out. This is what happens with your pressure receptors in the skin, tactile receptors of the skin. They tend to adapt relatively fast. We even adapt to temperatures after a certain period of time, depending on the type of temperature. Like, you don't tend to adapt to boiling or to ice as effectively as minute changes within temperature. So think about right now, if you are sitting, you probably stopped thinking about the pressure that was on your butt. But now that I've mentioned it, you're probably thinking, yeah, I do feel pressure on my butt. That's because your phasic receptors are working the way they're supposed to. That pressure that's on your butt is not super important. It's more important for you to focus on other things. But if this was something that was causing pain, pain can mean that your body is not in homeostasis and you need to fix something. So that's why tactile receptors are pain receptors, or pain receptors are always tactile, because you want to be able to respond to that pain and fix whatever's wrong. So we already talked about classifying receptors by their structure, but we can also use distribution of receptors, origin of the stimulus, and the modality of the stimulus to classify receptors. So here again you can see just by the type of receptor cells you can classify the receptors. You can also look at distribution. So we have general sense receptors throughout our entire body, both internal and externally. Somatic sensory receptors are general receptors found in the skin, joints, and muscles. And their function is to detect pain, stretch, vibrations. You have temperature, so lots of different little things. We have visceral receptors located in the walls of our organs, cardiovascular, thoracic cavity, and the abdominal cavities, stomach, stuff like that. And they respond again to temperature, chemical, stretch, different things like that, and send signals. Then we have special sense receptors. All of our special senses are located within our head. There are 5 special senses. We have gustation, which is your sense of taste, and that's located within your tongue. Olfaction, sense of smell, located in the nasal cavity. Vision, sense of sight, located in our eyes. Hearing, audition, and equilibrium, balance, and acceleration, both of those are within our ear. Then the stimulus origin. Where is the stimulus coming from? Is it external? Is it internal? Or is it in association with our body movements? And then what's the type of stimulus? We have chemoreceptors that take in chemical stimuli. We have thermoreceptors that take in temperature changes, photoreceptors, light, mechanoreceptors, movement, baroreceptors, pressure, and nociceptors are pain receptors. So one thing I always like to mention when we talk about senses is referred pain. Referred pain is pain associated with a region of the body that is not actually the origin of the pain. So kind of like when I was talking about scratching an itch and you have a large field, the sensory receptors are signaling this itch, but the actual stimulus is coming from a different region from where that sensory receptor is sending the signal. In this case, in referred pain, it's almost like you have a mix-up within that spinal column. So it's not a mix-up. What happens is we have both sensory and motor nerves sending signals through the spinal cord. The information within any given nerve, you're going to have axons that innervate organs of the viscera, as well as axons that innervate organs of the skin. And so when a signal is super strong and is sent, such as in this case, I'm showing like the heart is sending a signal, right? The heart sends a signal that, you know, there's some damage occurring, or there's some damage within that cardiovascular region, like the left ventricle is not getting enough blood or something, that sends a signal to the brain, and the information is sent out through the spinal nerves, and not only does it cause pain within the heart itself, but because that same spinal nerve innervates the arm and neck, actually, it's going to cause pain all down the medial side of the left arm. And that's known as a dermatome of the skin that has the same nerve innervating both. This can also occur, this can occur in a lot of areas. So my favorite example is brain freeze, because everybody has felt that. So when your mouth, when you get something really cold in it, it can actually cause you to get a headache, but your brain itself is not freezing. It's the roof of the mouth that's sending the signals that it's super cold. And so that's what's causing the problem. Here's another example. Appendicitis. The actual appendix is over here, and this this right inguinal region, but the actual pain we often feel is in the umbilical region. And then the one that I know that this has happened to me, when you have gallbladder pain from gallstones, the pain actually moves into the shoulder and actually can move down into that shoulder blade way down here. So I should have put the picture on the back as well. Serious pain all within that thoracic cavity and the right shoulder. So now we're going to get into each of the special senses and how they work. So the first sense that we talk about is taste or gustation. Chemoreceptors, known as taste molecules, chemoreceptors pick up taste molecules from the foods and drinks that enter our mouth. The chemicals have to be dissolved in saliva. If they are not dissolved in saliva, you won't taste them. Chemoreceptors are located within papilla that are found on the tongue. These papilla the papilla on the tongue contain what we call taste buds, and taste buds are where the receptors are located. And then there are different types of papilla that have the taste buds, or some have taste buds, some don't. But because these are open to the external environment, these are an example of neurons that are replaced very often, which is why people say your taste buds change every few years, so you should always try new foods. So there are different types of papilla, and some of these have a lot of taste buds and some don't have any. The first are the circumvallate. These up here are your circumvallate taste buds. They're the largest of all the taste buds, but they are not very numerous. They contain the majority of our taste buds, so they're the largest of the papilla, contain the majority of our taste buds. Not very numerous. They make like a V at the back of the tongue. We have filiform taste buds. These are the most numerous. They're found all over our tongue, tiny little projections. They do not have any taste buds on them. These filiform papilla actually function in detecting texture of food and helping in manipulating food. We have foliate taste buds, or foliate papilla. These are found on the sides of our tongue. They're very active during infancy. They do have taste buds in them, but in adulthood they're not very active. And then we have fungiform taste papilla at the tip of the tongue that also have some taste buds in them. Olfaction is your sense of smell. Chemoreceptors detect odorant molecules. Odorant molecules have to dissolve in mucus or we would not be able to smell. And humans don't have as great a sense of olfaction as other mammals. The smell receptors are found in the nasal cavity, and they are neurons again that are just hanging in that nasal mucosa. Because of this, they are more prone to damage, and so they are replaced approximately every couple of months. So we're able to distinguish multiple smells, not as many as other animals, but a lot of smells. But we do adapt relatively fast to many of those smells. So here you can see something comes into the nasal cavity, a smell. The deeper we breathe, the more odorant molecules will dissolve in the mucosa, and that'll pick up the information and send it through into the brain. And then in the temporal lobe, we will process that information and determine if it's something that we want to smell or not. We do adapt relatively fast, and we don't need a lot of ions to detect a smell. That being said, some people have better senses of smell than others. So as soon as an ion channel is altered, as soon as we take in odorant molecules, the ion channels are going to be altered, and then they're not going to be able to take in other information. And so we end up adapting to the smell relatively fast because we're not taking in more information. This is why if you come into your house and say you have a kitty litter box, or you have a your garbage is full and it smells, and initially you come in, you're like, whoa, I need to take the garbage out, or I need to clean the kitty litter box. But if you first run to the bathroom and maybe change into more comfy clothes, whatever, you will adapt and you may forget about that smell because of that. Also, the reason why people who wear too much perfume, or forget to bathe, might not realize that they smell because they have adapted to that smell. So gustation and olfaction work together. If you can't smell something, then you can't really taste it, which is why food tends to taste more bland when you have a cold. It's also an effective mechanism of helping kids who don't like certain foods to eat. Tell them to hold their nose and then chew the food. They might be able to eat it easier and they might end up learning to like it then. I'm going to stop here on this lecture, and we'll get into hearing in the next video. Bye.